In my first video, I made a claim that consciousness arises from something material, i.e., the brain and the chemical processes that go on inside the brain. Neurons firing and releasing neurotransmitters, that sort of thing. And what I basically was getting at was that there's no reason for us to believe that consciousness arises from anything else. So that's a bit of an intro to that. And it was brought up by someone named Thou Art That, like the name, by the way, that consciousness is not reducible to the brain. Now, I thought that this particular statement was really quite interesting because I agree and disagree with it depending on how you interpret the statement. Now, I disagree with the statement in the sense that I am not a dualist. When we say that consciousness is not reducible to the brain, we can interpret that to mean that there's this extra component to consciousness other than the brain, which I don't think is correct. My belief is, and I think that it is reasonable to believe, that everything that consciousness is results from these processes going on inside the mind, the physical processes. That's not to say that there definitely isn't a soul, but I suspend judgment of a soul given that there's no evidence for it. And I suspend judgment to the point that I think it is meaningless to even discuss it or believe in it because of the lack of evidence there is for it. So I disagree with the statement consciousness is not reducible to the brain in that way. But I agree with the statement in the sense that consciousness is this very personal experience, inherently private. It's completely subjective, right? I mean, and it was mentioned before, you can explain the processes inside the mind all you want, but when it comes to the taste of banana bread, as it was brought up, or the feeling of someone's hand, or, any sort of sensation or emotion or whatever, you don't exactly know what that's like unless you experience it. Say, for instance, if we discovered some weird species that we've never seen before, maybe, I don't know, an alien or something like that, and we dissect this alien, and we see that, most of the components of their brains are similar to ours, but there's X chemical that is released every so often. And we see that X chemical is related to behavior Y. Even though we could say that, X chemical is related to behavior Y, we wouldn't exactly know what the experience of that is like. And so consciousness has this inherently private aspect to it that probably won't, I can't see any way that we could, see inside someone else's head. So agree with the statement kind of, but to me, saying that consciousness is not reducible to the brain kind of sounds a little bit dualist, which I'm against, for a couple of reasons. Someone mentioned somewhere that they wanted me to cite studies in which we've studied consciousness. And actually, I think that there's quite a lot of research that's been done on this. Firstly, I'm going to define consciousness to be I think consciousness is pretty much, even though it's not really well defined a lot of the time, we all are talking about the same sort of thing. We're talking about this personal experience. We're talking about the sort of sensations that we get, sensory perception, taste, feel. There are lots of other sensations, vision, smell, hearing. Yeah, I got them all right. Okay, that's good. That doesn't matter. we all know what the five senses are, and feelings and emotion and all these sorts of thinking-related processes, independent thought, those sorts of things. And like I said, a lot of research has actually been done into this. Yeah. Okay, before I go on to research, I want to talk about like another reason why we should believe in consciousness arising from something material. Even when you have something happen to you, like you hit your head on something, it's a physical process that affects your head, it affects your brain, right? And sometimes you lose consciousness. So this is a further reason to believe that consciousness arises from material stuff. But yeah, I'm going to talk about research. So there's a famous Canadian neurosurgeon in the beginning of the 20th century whose last name was Penfield, whose first name I can't remember, but basically what he did is before we had ethics boards, neurosurgeons like Penfield were allowed to put patients under like partial anesthetics to get them in a sort of state of mind where you could open up their skull region and poke at their brain and see exactly what happened. And so Penfield was one of the researchers to do this, and he poked around in this woman's brain to try to cure her of seizures because she had epilepsy or something like that. He found that by stimulating different portions of the brain with his little pick or whatever it was, that he could actually get her to experience things that she wasn't actually, that weren't real. For example, she felt like pouring water on her hand when he stimulated a particular region. He got her to smell burnt toast. I think in an instance he got her to raise her arm without her knowing what exactly she was doing, and when he asked her, "Why are you raising your arm?" she was like, "I don't know." So we can see that consciousness can actually be manipulated from the physical side of things. So I think that's really quite interesting. And like, I don't know how many of you out there have done hallucinogenic drugs, or most of you have probably consumed a bit of alcohol. We've got all these chemicals that are out on the market that can alter our state of mind. Pretty much every aspect of consciousness, sensory perception and feelings and all these things that we usually label to be part of consciousness can be manipulated chemically, and so there's no real reason to believe that the mind results from anything other than chemicals. Yeah. So, okay, I just wanted to talk a little bit now about understanding someone who believes in a soul, in a sense, because I used to be kind of like, I don't understand how, the material world. I look around and I see that, like, my mind is made up of the same thing as inanimate objects. Like, that doesn't seem to make sense. Like, how is my brain made up of the same sort of things that this can is made up of? Or, sorry, I like using props. Like, that doesn't work. I am self-aware. The material world doesn't seem to be. And so how does that come about? And I had this explained really well to me by one of my good friends a couple of years ago. I think this is actually a really enlightening example. So think about water. Think about the properties of water. What is water? Water is wet. Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. It evaporates at 100 degrees Celsius. We drink it in order to survive. Water has all these properties to it. Now think about what makes up water. Water is 2 hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom smushed together in covalently bonded to get this molecule that we call water. It has all these crazy properties to it that when you take the molecule apart, just oxygen by itself or just hydrogen by itself in its ionized forms, they have completely different properties. But when you put them together, you've got all these emergent properties. You've got the fact that it's wet, the fact that we sustain ourselves on it, the fact that, it freezes. It has all these properties that weren't there before, and all you had to do was put them together. And so when you look at the chemicals that make up the mind, suddenly you can see that, maybe it doesn't become so far-fetched anymore that chemicals are what make up the mind, and not anything mystical or immaterial.